Beloved friends, today we celebrate the third Sunday in the season of Advent. If joy had a soundtrack in your life right now, what would it be playing? The third Sunday of Advent is traditionally known as Gaudete Sunday, a day when the church invites us to pause in the middle of Advent's sober waiting and to taste already the joy that is coming. We would observe that the rose-colored vestment is used and the rose candle is lit, which signal that something is shifting. The dawn is beginning to break. The readings today center on joyful hope that God is near and the celebration of the transforming joy that comes with the Lord's promise is arriving. Maria, one of our elderly parishioners, while playing with her grandkid, fell down, unfortunately, and broke her hip. At her age, it was 50-50 for her to undergo surgery, but she chose to do so anyway. Her family and I really thought that her healing will take forever. But surprisingly, Maria had a miraculous quick recovery. When Maria showed up one day early to church after 3 months to set up for Mass with so great a joy in her face, I was stunned, and so I asked her how she managed to stay so joyful. She smiled and said, Father, joy doesn't come from what's happening around me. It comes from knowing that God is still with me in all of it. Father, believe it or not, joy can live where worry once lived. When we trust that God is near, Maria's response was more than a beautiful sermon for Gaudete Sunday. My dear friends, the first reading from Isaiah today paints a vivid image of the desert blooming, the parched land overflowing with life, the weak strengthened, the blind seeing, and the lame leaping. Although Isaiah spoke this prophecy to a people worn down by exile, people who were struggling to survive on hope, it remains a living word for us today that God's promised salvation is not abstract. Rather, it is embodied in the coming Messiah. Therefore, the Advent joy is not naive optimism, as it is the conviction that God is already at work restoring what has been broken around us. In the second reading today from the letter of St. James, chapter 5, we hear the message, be patient, strengthen your hearts, for the coming of the Lord is at hand. This is not the patience of resignation. It is the patience of a farmer who trusts that what he cannot see is still growing. Let's be honest. Waiting is hard. The feeling of not knowing the outcome or the timeline of anything creates a gap that the mind often fills with doubt and fear. And so it provokes a feeling of powerlessness because the situation is outside of our influence. Moreover, it is easy to equate patient waiting with inactivity. But the Advent's patience is not about doing nothing. Instead, it's about living and trusting in God's promise as true even before they are fully visible. This is a perspective of the Gospel of Matthew as he places us with John the Baptist in prison. From the prison, John sends a question to Jesus, saying, are you the one who is to come, or should we look for another? It wasn't necessarily a loss of faith, but a deep struggle with God's unfolding plan, a common human experience of doubt during tough times. In response, Jesus drew attention to the prophetic signs of healing and good news of which Isaiah prophesied. By this, Jesus affirmed his identity while highlighting the shift from judgment to salvation. Now, remember that John preached of a Messiah bringing judgment, as we read in Luke chapter 3, verse 7 to 9. Jesus, however, was curing the sick and preaching good news, not wielding fire and wrath, which sort of created a conflict with John's ingrained image of the Messiah. Now, Jesus is telling John and us, look again, God is already acting, but perhaps not in the way you imagined. In fact, God's work is often quiet, gentle, and unexpected. Christ's coming is already underway, even if we cannot fully perceive it. On Gaudete Sunday, the church does not ask us to pretend everything is perfect. Rather, she invites us to rejoice because God is near, even if life is still messy or unresolved. The Christian joy is a fruit of the Holy Spirit. It arises when we recognize that God's love goes deeper than our wounds, that His promises are trustworthy, and that His kingdom is already breaking into our world. My dear friends, today, can you notice any sign of grace in you that you have overlooked? Has God ever surprised you or your friend or family member? When was the last time you were joyful, not because of your achievement, but the miracles around you? Remember, our hope is anchored in God's fidelity, and His salvation is already unfolding. May this Sunday awaken in us a joy rooted not in what we have achieved, but in what God is accomplishing. Again, if joy had a soundtrack in your life right now, what would it be playing?